Welcome to another edition of The Fight, and let's jump right into this thing. UFC 261 happened last night, and it was amazing. Listen, first full sold out live event for the UFC since UFC 248, which was March 7th, 2020. So to see 15,000 fans in attendance, man, you talk about taking the broadcast, taking it to another element, another level. Whew. I thought I was enjoying these fights with no fans, not having to hear the crowd booing and cheering and not really knowing what's going on. But the crowd being in attendance last night made every single main card fight that much better, that much bigger, that much sweeter. The moments, the photos afterwards, obviously are circulating on social media. It was just an insane atmosphere. Got to tip my cap to UFC for that, man. They've been one of the pioneers in terms of continuing to throw live events and just continuing to throw out big sporting events throughout this, crazy unprecedented time. So big shout out to them for that. But man, I got to start right with the big dog fight, man. Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal 2. Man, did that fight live up to expectations? Now, it was exciting because the storyline leading into this. Remember, the first time they fought, it was on 6 days' notice. Gamebred, a.k.a. Jorge Masvidal, a.k.a. Street Jesus, took the fight on 6 days' notice, and it was some, different reports in terms of how Kamaru Usman acquired a broken nose. If you let Jorge tell it, it was because of the fight. He said he broke his nose during the fight. If you let Usman say it, then he tells you that it happened during training and he went into the fight with a broken nose. But either way, outside of the first round of that initial fight, it really wasn't a competitive fight. Usman was able to just keep him on the ground, dominate him with his wrestling, his grappling, and it went like we thought it would go. But that was the intrigue because we said on 6 days' notice, Jorge let it all go in that first round and looked good. A lot of people thought he won that first round. So what would it look like with a full training camp? Could he come out here and put the pressure on Usman? Could he make Usman have to stand up for 5 rounds and trade with one of the best guys on their feet in terms of striking ability? And we got a chance to see it. But what we couldn't expect was this. Usman continuing to grow and get better. The Nigerian Nightmare. Whew, did he ever live up to that name again? Whew. It was just beautiful, man. He obviously comes out and from start showing his jab, man, popping his head back multiple times. And you could just see that he knew he had the ability to take Jorge down. He took him down in that first round and controlled him. Great grappling and things like that. But you could tell he was very, very, focused on his striking. And it showed in a big way. He was tighter with his punches, his jabs, everything was clean. And then you see him connect with that straight right hand. Oh, good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. Something that we haven't seen happen to Jorge in the UFC, period. I mean, you look at how many fights he's had and how many times he's actually been stopped. I mean, it's crazy when you look at those details from a statistical standpoint. But Kamaru Usman showing growth, showing another element to his game. And it wasn't necessarily that he was just this great striker and that's ultimately how he caught Jorge. No, it's because of his elite wrestling and grappling ability and his ability to take him down in the first that ultimately had Jorge thinking about it the whole time. And he catches him clean, flush, lights out, literally before he hits the ground, he's asleep. Then just a couple of, hammer fists for good measures. But man, you talk about a dominant performance from start to finish. You love to see it. And for me, honestly, after seeing the fight on 6 days notice and then seeing the fight with the full training camp, as much as stylistically this is an intriguing fight, I don't need to see it again. I've seen Usman dominate him in the wrestling realm, and now I've seen him dominate him standing up, striking. We could put that matchup to rest. We don't need to see a trilogy, not anytime soon. But the next fight, which I was a little bit surprised / disappointed / intrigued about, Dana White has already said that for Kamaru, for his next welterweight title defense is going to be against Colby Covington, a guy that he's already beaten, but that was the best we've seen in terms of him being challenged. That was the most we've seen him be able to be pushed to that extent. So it's going to be good to see the rematch. It would have happened a lot sooner, but obviously Colby had sustained a broken jaw during the fight the first time, so that kind of put a damper on things. But I do like it. And like I said, I'm intrigued about it just because of, all right, it was so close the first time, even though Kamaru still found a way to close it out and get the win. We're trying to see, can he, make an adjustment? What can Colby do to close that gap? But seeing Kamaru, seeing his growth as a striker now, man, it just makes it seem a little bit more daunting of a task for Kobe. But also, man, the fight that I really wanted to see, and I've already spoke about this before, is Kamaru versus Leon Edwards. I personally thought that Leon Edwards was in line for the fight. Obviously, we talked about some of the just bad luck that he's had between fights being pulled and canceled and things like that. Then obviously we saw his previous fight and how it got stopped. Just a lot of unfortunate circumstances around Leon, but Leon's gonna have, he's got a nice little fight coming up, man, in terms of Nick Diaz. So it's gonna be, Nate Diaz. So it's gonna be interesting to see, how that whole dynamic plays out. But I'm excited about that because those are two very game fighters, and I do think the winner of that will ultimately get that next title shot after the Kobe Covington and Kamaru Usman fight. So I'm excited about that. Definitely looking forward to that coming up in the future. But the co-main event, we got to talk about these three title fights. The co-main event lived up to expectations as well. In fact, some people would even say it exceeded expectations. We had young Weili versus Thug Rose Namajunas. Now, we obviously have talked about how dominant Weili has been since she's joined the UFC, was on a 20-fight win streak, had just came off a dominant performance against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in one of the fights that we think personally is going to go down as the fight of the year, one of the most historic fights in UFC history. I mean, it lived up to all of that billing, but we obviously knew about about Thug Rose. And ultimately with Rose, man, she had beat Joanna twice in devastating fashion the first time, knocking her out. And outside of a fluky slam on her head to Jessica Andrade, she had been, on the rise and was a beast. But then obviously she gets hurt, loses the belt, but comes back and wins some more. So you see, the storyline of she never really lost the belt. She more so got hurt, fluky slam, but she was going to be having her toughest test. And we thought that this was going to be one of those wars, just all out brawls. But man, you talk about Thug Rose and her timing, her movement from start to, it didn't last that long. It was only about, half a minute, if that, 2 minutes tops. But the way, Rose is moving around, just controlling the distance and just making Weili have to gauge her, try to find the distance. And you could just see Rose, man, she comes in with the high kick. And it was crazy because most of the time that kick lands outside of a person's arm, right? More so on this angle, but she was able to get it inside here, put her to sleep. I mean, it was nuts. Now, granted, Weili, she has an amazing chin. I mean, even though she dropped, we thought it was over then, she technically was still awake, technically. But we also, man, the hammer fist at the end of that thing definitely put her out. Glad that the referee stopped the fight, even though she got up and she was upset about the stoppage. Heat of the moment, that's all that was, man. If she goes back and looks at this fight again multiple times, she will see that, yes, that was the correct answer. That was the best decision to stop that fight because she could not defend herself. It was over with. But that's the fight I got to see a rematch in. Have to, because both of those fighters are too good. Both of their storylines, everything that's led up to this fight, it's perfect. And because of how fast the finish was, it leaves the intrigue of, was this a lucky shot? Was it a fluke? Now, I don't think it was a fluke because Rose is a beast. I mean, the same thing can be said when she fought Joanna the first time, and then she ran it back and dominated her again. For me, I just want to see it again because it happened so fast. I just feel like Weili is too dominant a fighter, too good of a fighter to not get the opportunity to come back. So I definitely look forward to seeing that. Hopefully, it doesn't take too long for this rematch to happen, but as a whole, that's the one. That is definitely the one. But that was an amazing fight. I mean, I feel like anytime Rose wins a belt, she does it in just dominant, historic, just mind-blowing fashion. And surely enough, she lived up to that billing again last night. And then the third title fight. This is the one that kind of gets forgotten about because it was just so one-sided, so lopsided. Bullet Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade. Now, this was going to be interesting only on paper because we would talk about how obviously we feel like Valentina Shevchenko is just outside of Amanda Nunes. She is, arguably the best woman fighter right now. Now, the biggest thing between her and Amanda, why it's hard to say who's better, is more so Amanda's just bigger. And that's what makes it such a difficult and intriguing fight for her. But anybody that's in her size, I mean, she dominates them. But the thing with Jessica, it was like, man, she's a strong person. She could grapple. She can work on the ground and things like that. So the intrigue was, what happens in the clinch? What happens when it's on the ground? and Valentina isn't able to use her elite level striking ability because, I mean, Valentina, she usually just dominates you by just pure volume, accumulation of just headshot, body shot, just destroying her victims. But in this fight, it was like, okay, if she can't do that, how does she find a way to win? Don't worry about it. Valentina went out there and had her mind made up from the beginning. I'm not going to punch you in the face 50 times. I'm just going to slam you on your head 50 times. And sure enough, she showed, man, strength in the clinch, the grappling ability, just ragdolling her. I thought it was Khabib Nurmagomedov for a second. I'm like, bruh, what is this? I love it. But she was just too much of a beast. And then even when Jessica, tries to do her signature slams where she's in the grapple and the clinch and she, just uses her great strength that she has to pick up her opponents, it was a no-go. I mean, you saw her try, boom, went to the well again, and it was over. And once that happened, we said, oh yeah, it's a wrap. Sure enough, Valentina gets to the ground, puts her in a crucifix, and from there, I mean, just punching elbows. It was more of a mercy stop. We said, I'm talking to my wife. My wife was like, yo, what is going on here? I'm like, trust me, babe. I am so glad that this referee stopped this fight because her face, it was going to look real pinata-like, real jack-o'-lantern-like when Valentina got done with them elbows. But as a whole, man, you love to see it. Now, she's the intriguing one, though, in terms of what her next fight should be, though, because for me, I don't really see a lot of people that can challenge her in her division right now. I feel like for her in that flyweight division is not a lot for her. She's won 7 in a row now. It's the most in women's featherweight history. So for me, if it's not Amanda Nunes for that trilogy fight, I don't really have a lot of intrigue for her division right now. I mean, we can do the whole, all right, we can run it back and have her fight this person again and this person again. But to me, I don't really like that as much. Now, with Amanda Nunes, as I said earlier, the problem is the weight, man. She's just a bigger fighter. But that second fight was very close. Second fight was very close. Some people even thought that Valentina got it. For me personally, I thought Nunes had did enough throughout the fight that she had won it. But like I said, in the third fight, it could be intriguing. But the whole weight element, that's the biggest issue to me. But that's the fight that I feel like both of those women have to make because there isn't a lot of action for either one of them without having to go through the recycle rule. And even they're going for a trilogy fight, it's still going to be recycled. So that's the dilemma right there. But either way, I'm going to be tuned in because those ladies both can throw some serious hands and deliver major punishment, which I absolutely love to see, man. And, we got to also talk about some of the, not the title fights on that main card, but the two, non-title fights. And it was crazy seeing those as well. Starting out with Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman. Unfortunate, crazy, gruesome freak injury. I mean, I felt like I was watching Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva all over again. Identical, just different legs, in terms of when it was Anderson Silva, he was kicking with his left leg. Obviously, the kick gets checked, breaks it right on that shin bone, and from there, it just looks gory. Same exact thing happens for Chris Weidman, except on the other side now, and instead of him being the person checking the kick, he was the one delivering the kick. Gruesome, makes you want to throw up inside your mouth, swallow it, then throw it up again. It was that type of injury. But as a whole, nothing but class from Uriah. Nothing but class. I mean, you hate to win a fight like that, but Uriah's been hot right now as well. And it's just one of those things. I mean, it happens. So you definitely hope Weidman recovers. It's one of those injuries that you just never know how he's going to come back from. But man, it was gruesome. Whew. And shoot, the first fight to start off the main card had a similar ending, but at least it wasn't as gruesome. And this was with Anthony Smith and Jimmy Crute. Now, that first fight, that first round, we're trying to see what Anthony was going to look like. We said with Anthony, he looked very good against John Jones. But at the same time, we've seen him flop a lot since then. So you were just kind of like, all right, is he going to show up and be like the John Jones version? Or is he going to be the guy that, fights down to his competition and gets knocked out? But from start, I mean, he looked good. He looked very calculated and was timing me. He looked like he was, improved from the previous times that we saw him. And then he just lands a monster leg kick. I mean, it was beautifully timed and just shuts off the nerves in Jimmy Crute's leg. I mean, he gets drop foot literally in the middle of the fight. His foot goes numb. He can't stand up. He obviously he scored a takedown though when it happened, and that kind of masked it a little bit and helped him survive that round. But literally, once he's trying to come out for that second round, he cannot stand up on that foot. No pressure. I mean, he would have been a liability out there. If you allow him to go out there and you're the doctor, you should be fired. Like, that was the scenario. So for me, like I said, I could definitely understand it. I don't necessarily need to see a rematch of that either, but it was at least good to see Anthony get a win. It was good to see Anthony bounce back and just continue to be, arrow pointed back up because he showed promise, man, in that fight versus John Jones. So I'm just hoping that he can continue this on because it makes that division a little bit more exciting as well. But like I said, as a whole, amazing card. UFC 261, I absolutely loved it. And I'm excited about some of these fights that are coming up, baby. Yes, indeed. We're going to get McGregor, Poirier. We're going to get, like I said, Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards. I mean, we got some nice fights coming up in here. We already said Usman and Kobe Covington is going to be happening as well. So just stay tuned, man, because we got a lot more to talk about. But you know how we do this thing, man. Shout out to y'all for tuning in. And until next time, baby, peace.